Hey guys, Luca here. Today I wanted to talk about some tips and not really tricks, but just stuff to think about when you're doing experimental digital painting or any sort of digital painting in general. So here I'll have a time lapse of a stream I did where I recorded my whole process live. Of course, I really didn't talk while on stream because I intend to talk now about what sort of my thought process is. Sometimes it's kind of hard to talk while drawing, and so I've just accepted that, like, if I want to give a quality discussion, then yeah, I kind of need to separate the processes. Anyway, yeah, so for these paintings and a lot of my paintings in general, I'm usually thinking about process actively in my head when I'm doing them. And I have this sort of habit that has allowed my work to become what it is, in that I am always like conscious of what I'm doing in my like work. I can never really fully turn my brain off and get into this thing people call like a flow state. It's always a conscious choice making process. And that may be the same way for a lot of people. So if you think like me, um, you could still paint surreal, you could still paint crazy, weird things, and you can still experiment and do things you wouldn't expect. You don't have to turn your brain off. That's the first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is with these pieces and with every single one, you, it's good to be coherent. It's good to be lucid and be able to like think through and also talk about the decisions you're making. So like I could explain right now what I'm doing, and a main way that I've been starting digital paintings that's not as experimental, but it does allow for me to experiment a lot with the later parts of the process because it gives you a solid structure. But it's just have a white background and then have a black ink, or a black paint, you could call it. It's all digital, so a black tinted brush, fully black on a fully white background, and then I just go in and, as if I'm using some sort of traditional medium, all I do is paint and erase. And that way I'm simplifying it down to like a lightening and darkening process, to where like my only thoughts are like, you either make this lighter or you make this darker. Um, and that leads to results like the one you're seeing come into fruition. And I've been sort of infatuated with this like grotesque, I don't know, grotesque, the nature of grotesque. And I really enjoy painting weird, grotesque stuff because in some way it's more beautiful and intriguing to me than anything like pretty and organized. Uh, uh, it has its own structure that I think is really nice whenever you get a different sort of feeling rather than just like comfort from something being attractive or pretty. Um, but yeah, so that's what I chose to paint, the subject matter. And the method is this simple sort of method of building up value that I've been using for a good amount of time now. And this is a way that I warm up. So this was a warm up painting as well. So that goes into it. And I was conscious of that. Like I was doing it to the extent of, I wasn't really worried about bringing this thing to color or making a story or doing anything in specific. I just wanted to feel painting. It's a drawing warm up, a painting warm up. And so it's important that you have something like that in your repertoire where you're able to have a way that you can make an output that maybe sort of satisfies a little bit of uh, your wants and needs for like making art. And do that first as a warm up. I think it's important to warm up in any exercising. Um, and then you get into the sort of experimentation. The reason why I usually don't experiment as much with warm ups. I still do. I still experiment in the same way, but it's just because like the process of experimentation, you have to be very confident, and so we'll see that in this next uh, piece, and this is the one that's the big bulk of the video, is how confident you kind of have to be in just uh, make decisions, try things out, try different methods. And once you release yourself from this idea that a process has to go linearly, You can't go backwards. You can't like fold something onto itself. Uh, you're restricting already. And in my eyes, it's like you have these parameters that you're working with, which are simply all gradients. This is what I would make a video on this in the future. But you just have a bunch of gradients to work with, light to dark, saturated to completely desaturated, chromatic to non-chromatic. Uh, you have a wide scale of color to work with. So all of those things, harsh, and then you get into edges. Like I could keep naming different gradients that you can use to sort of like organize pieces. And so the experimentation kind of comes from, for me, dealing with my visual perception, and then also like mentally I'm seeing, I'm experiencing the work, and then I'm thinking, oh, this gives me this sort of result, the feedback, and it's sort of a loop, like a feedback loop. Your painting informs your next decisions, and it helps as well that I'm interested in doing surrealist, like just out there art. Like I'm not as so much as interested in doing kind of classical illustration or modern illustration or concept art or anything like that. It really does help that my intentions are just to make an experiment with like art and the just 2D art in general and the digital space mostly. So to me, this is like art. This is like has just as much artistic merit as like any other art piece, and all of y'all, whatever you guys are doing, falls under that same boat. Uh, and I think the having the confidence to know that like I can produce something good if I wanted to, has helped me let go of that need and instead follow the feeling, the visceral. And so that's what I start to do. And with this, there's a lot of different things I do with Photoshop, specifically like techniques, where I may take a part of the painting and then I like the shape, the texture that it gives, and then I just flatten the painting above everything. And you can see that in my layer system. Sometimes I'll flatten the whole painting, take a piece of it, and then layer it over top, apply turn it into a different layer mode, and use it as a texture, use it as a filter over the painting, or create new shapes with it. And see, in this one I was using a lot of lasso tool and selections. Is something I, sometimes I just have a feeling where I want to do it, like I want some sharp selections, even if I'm keeping it sketchy and abstract. But that's the thing, like I'm aware of it. I'm thinking to myself, yes, in this piece I am going to be using lasso tool more, and that's just the way it is. And once you get into the sort of motions of a piece, you get comfortable with whichever way you decided to start working. So being confident and then being active minded are both really important. Now, when it comes to experimenting, and if you're like interested in doing things like portraits, character design, environment art, landscape art, you want to work traditionally as well. You want to just draw things. You want to draw cool concept art or robots or whatever the case. I still think there's like aspects of this mentality that can kind of work for that, but I think it's more of just an awareness that your mentality is important, and like you can't just like listen to other people and expect to be as good as them or be like them in any way. So I would, advise, if you're interested in doing um, things that aren't like me or like me, take everything I say with a grain of salt, of course, but also imagine how it could apply to you. If my artwork isn't really generally appealing to you, or it's not what you would want to do, still imagine what you can take from me that could help your process. And I that's another big thing that I do is even when I'm not particularly fond of an output or a style, I always am interested in the methodology that somebody used to get to it, or the thinking, what was their actual thought process behind it, like what was the psychology behind it, and what I can do to explore how that may change and open my mind. And those are usually what I'm going for, ways to change my mind, because there's no real progression I found in being idle and doing the same thing all the time. You have to change, especially as a creative. And so engaging with these really surreal, sort of formless, abstract paintings is my way of growing, because I'm not tied to anything. I'm just tied to, like, okay, we're going to make something that feels like it's representative of form, shape, color, light. I'm not going to worry about realism. I'm just going to go for that visceral reaction you get. Um, and yeah, it's important that you have some level of thinking where you can find maybe something helpful about that. But again, go back to talking about technique. I think for this one, it was kind of like my classic way of thinking. If you have it on your page, you can use it to make the painting more interesting. And instead of like restricting myself in this piece to just build up with like gesture or line, I was just like, okay, if I like these textures, I'm gonna just reuse them, and stay pretty simple. I didn't want to like add too much. That's the thing with this painting. I didn't want to add too much. I just wanted to, like, kind of work through it pretty like straightforward, and not do too much with it, because I think it started to live and it started to breathe. It started to feel like this ambient nightmarish amalgam, and those are the things I really like, because so much of life is untangible like that. And you can't really describe it. It just is, and it exists, and it's uncomfortable sometimes. So yeah, that was a big thing for me with that one. And ooh, I bet you didn't expect we have a third painting. Yes, this video is pretty interesting. I'm talking straight up. I haven't even cut. So I'm going to just do a little like cut here just in case. So yeah, this one, another way that I like to experiment is I like to take classical or like really old art and look at the composition and just try to like take some piece of that composition. Maybe it's like the structure of elements where I see focal points, and just put my focal points in the same place to begin with, and take whatever method I want to get there. So like the way I painted this one, again, it still is loose in the same way I painted the other ones, but I was thinking differently. I was feeling differently as well. So I immediately took a different approach to working on it, and I sort of built up forms. I still use a little bit of lasso, still use a little bit of just scribbling, but I was engaged, kinda. I had some points where I like there's a point where I sort of just freeze. Um, and sometimes you can take time to think. Sometimes I'm doing other stuff, like probably eating or doing something. That's the good thing about like having my stream not have my audio, because I can just be doing other things while I'm painting. So even though it is an active and conscious process and all that, it's still like uh it's hard to just sit down for like 4 hours and just straight work. Um it's not easy. So with this last painting, I was I was happy with all of these as sketches, as little ideas that I was able to push out. And that's the important thing I would like to say in the second half, is being happy with little things. And every the seeing painting in the same way that you see drawing and sketching, in that you're just making it more complicated, number one. So you can't expect every painting to be good. Can't expect there to be perfection. What you can expect is you might get a different result if you try different things. And if you have a principle like me that you think improving the quality of your drawing will improve the quality of your paintings, and you just see what happens when you adhere to that principle, uh, it might yield results that keep you going and allow you to make 5 paintings a day, 6 paintings a day. I can do that, and it's not. I'm not seeing it as like a entirely as a wow, I can make 5 paintings. So that's like cool in itself that you can make 5 things that are relatively uh, interesting. Um, it doesn't have to just be that. It can just be that, like, in order to just release and be able to improvise and sketch, you are able to do that, and you can do it within like a short amount of time. That's really a fun and freeing thing to be able to experience, is being able to improvise on your own. So yeah, with this one, with the subject matter, again, I just kind of like go with the form and put maybe insinuation of figures or like uh, creature or whatever, characters, anything you want to call it, but I give some nods to human life, like the human figure, landscape, of course, because it's fun to draw ourselves and our likeness. But I just like to mess it up and make it weird and not like just draw human bodies. I've talked to people about it before. I find sort of just straight up drawing people like is too much vanity for an already vain person. Like I I'll draw people if I need to, but in my personal work. I've experimented a lot with it, and I like doing things outside of that. I like making things more alien or surreal or dreamlike, and just drawing a person straight up as an artwork uh, doesn't work for me. So if I want to draw somebody, it's like I want to capture something outside of them. So I don't want to exactly just draw from a photo reference. Drawing from life is a little bit differently. There's a bit of intimacy that I appreciate there. But yeah, the with these images and how I experiment is just like, how can I take the thought of human form and add it into this picture without it being so overt, and allowing it to still be able to feel like landscape or like a um, just colors that work nice together. So that's what I was doing here. And here I'm not sure what I was doing. I might have been listening to music or like talking with friends about that. Um, oh yeah, so definitely. Uh, uh, in terms of, again, technique, which I can talk about just a little bit, I kind of just think what is going to show form. Where's like, I think mostly compositionally, and I think, is my decision going to like improve my composition, the quality of my drawing, um, and yeah, I just kind of make decisions that way. So I'll add colors in where I see fit. If I choose to make a color in a certain place and I like the transition, I like the hue variation or the gradient of hues and colors, I will try to put that in other places around the piece. So then the piece becomes not about the subject as much, but how the subject is portrayed in the positioning of everything. So I kind of think of them as sort of like still lives of flesh and weird abstract uh, shapes. And I also keep it sketchy. As you can see, I don't really zoom in very much or very often. I keep my piece at either a sort of zoomed out state where I can see the whole thing, or at sort of a medium where I'm like slightly zoomed in. And in that way, I feel a little bit self conscious when zooming in on my pieces, because it seems like, oh, these things are just like a mess. But the my perception of them is usually from this like zoomed out version, so I rarely get that deep into the detail unless I'm doing an intricate drawing, which I can still experiment with, but these like fully colored paintings are the easiest way for me to experiment because I'm not restricted by like, well, to make a good drawing, these drawings just have to look better in their own. I can kind of play around with all these different things and ways to make the drawing, the painting more interesting that I might not fully get by just doing a basic line drawing or tone drawing. So, yeah, I think that about sums up my ideas, and I feel like I've been sinking into my chair as I'm talking, but oh well. Um, so yeah, for these three paintings, technique is so variable, so you guys can do whatever you want with your techniques. Um, but my tips are, as I've discussed in the video, your confidence, your openness to being able to experiment, and your being conscious while you're doing it, not like letting go of you are responsible for what's happening on your canvas. And in that way, you'll be like it's like you're driving a car, you're not on some roller coaster where you can't control it and you're just in a flow state, blah blah blah. You can get into that and experiment with those processes too. Uh, I can't lie and say I've never experienced that. I just mostly don't rely on that to push me forward. Um, I like to think of it as more of like driving or an exercise uh, uh, that you you can never like fully stop thinking, right? Um, or just let it go. There's a lot to hold on to, and that's why it's experimental. Now, if I'm doing a piece and I have like an intention, I might actually, and it's not just to experiment, it's to like make a certain visual statement. I might like pull back and just allow myself to make that, just only think about that thing. And but yeah, I don't know. I still think that's actively conscious. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you maybe gained something out of listening to me talk. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. At least maybe you enjoyed seeing the processes, seeing these little artworks come together. Uh, yeah, of course I'm using like all these weird freaky techniques, but that's not where the fun's at. The fun is in the thinking behind it. That's where you'll be able to have fun too. So I would say good luck to everybody. I hope you guys are able to paint and have a wonderful rest of your year. It's very early into the year. And yeah, good luck. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the video, if you are interested in seeing any other things. Of course, more videos in the future, and I'll probably be streaming like every day around some point, afternoons, evenings, Eastern Standard. Thanks, guys. Peace out.